This is going to be the next game I do a video of, the Amstrad CPC version of Cobra. And I did do a video, I guess it must have been a few years back, of the ZX Spectrum version of this. This one is a completely differently programmed game. It's not a conversion of that one. And it turns out that the one for the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC are all different games. Although they are fairly similar. I guess they just had different teams working on all three games. And this is another one of those, the Hit Squad tapes. So it's a fairly cheap looking thing. But actually, I quite like buying these. This is a fairly simple game. It's a fairly simple story. It's obviously based on the movie, which I've never seen. The controls, even though they are fairly simple, it does neglect to say something that you do need to play the game. I'll show you a bit later. And it's got fixed keyboard controls as well, if you want to use the keyboard. I've got my Amstrad set up, so let's load this up and play some Cobra. Well, that's a nice loading screen. And that's using Amstrad's Mode 0. Nice and colourful. And the game just starts. So I'd walked away whilst it was loading and the game just started and I must have got a game over. But this is me starting it properly. There's no title screen or anything. First impressions though, it's nice and colourful. The animation's not too bad. And the graphics are a little bit cartoony, but they're quite nicely drawn. And there's quite a nice big screen. Oh god, I'm being attacked by a pigeon. I guess he's a bad guy. Is that guy washing his car? I took a lot of bullets to the face just then. Yeah, but after the initial first impressions, it all starts to fall apart really. You have to kill the bad guys on the level to get to the next one. It's not terribly frustrating to move around. The platforming is fine, but enemies always have weapons and they will start shooting at you before you can get close enough to them. So you're always going to take damage, and yet you only start off with fists. It does get a little bit better later when you start picking up some weapons, but for quite a long time I wasn't really 100% sure on how to do that. I did read the instructions, but I obviously didn't pay attention properly, because what you're supposed to do to get weapons is you're supposed to kill the snipers in the windows, or just other things in the windows, and occasionally there'll be a hamburger left behind, and the hamburger will give you a weapon. But even after getting the weapon, I still didn't know how to select it. But what you're actually supposed to do to select your weapon is press the cursor key on your keyboard. And even though you start off with a knife, you throw the knife. So you've got a sort of projectile, but it still doesn't improve things too much. And there you go, I've actually got my first game over already. Only 3 minutes into the game. So this is a pretty tough game. Let's try that again. It's a little bit slow, but I must say the screen scrolling is actually pretty smooth. And it seems to only be slow because of how slow the character walks. And there's just a tiny little bit of variation in the graphics as well. So there are some positives here really. But I think the gameplay is a killer really, and it just ruins everything. I think for this video, I don't think you'll mind me talking over the music, because the music's not particularly good. Oh god, that pigeon just made me explode. He dies like Dizzy does in the first Dizzy game. Alright, so this guy might have a hamburger. If I can kill him. Ah, there we go. Right, so I've got a knife. But at this point, I didn't know how to use it. I did get just a little bit wiser as I carried on playing. If you're standing on the same level as these enemies, then they'll just spam weapons at you, as you can sort of see. It's a bit sloppy, isn't it? It's not very sophisticated. The enemies will just come along, and when they get close to you, they'll just start shooting. I mean, at this point, I could drop down and punch them in the back of the head. The whole game has a sort of a rushed feel to it, really. I wonder if they wanted it to be better, but just didn't have the time to do it. It does have some potential to be a fairly decent game. Well, I mean, Ocean got it right a bit later on with their later movie licenses, didn't they? I think RoboCop came after this. And in many ways, RoboCop is similar to this one, but it's a much, much better game. And I've somehow managed to get to level 2. So it looks like you can progress without having any weapons. What was that? Was that an earthquake? Another downside to the game is that the controls are actually quite stiff. And by that I mean, if you press a direction, if you want to turn around, you do have to hold in that direction for just a little bit too long before he turns around. If someone's shooting you in the back, you're not able to react fast enough. And it's just little things like that that just sort of ruin the game. Hold on a minute, is that a guy that's hanged himself? No, it can't be. They wouldn't put that in a game, surely. Like my previous video, this is published by Ocean. It's not an arcade conversion, it is a movie license, but they always did some sort of licensing. And this is a lot earlier than Toki. In fact, I think this game only came out about 2 years after the Amstrad was first released. I'm not going to make any assumptions on whether they prioritise certain platforms over others, but at this point they might not have really cared too much about Amstrad CPC games. But I mean, they bothered to make a separate version for it, so who knows. It must have been difficult for companies to know which computers to make games for. Right, so I've got to start again. I still haven't been able to work out how to select my knife. Oh, those birds. Those birds, I just couldn't get to grips with killing those, whatever they're supposed to be. Get his hamburger. He hasn't got one. Damn. There's 3 boxes there, so there's obviously 3 weapons you can collect. I bet there's definitely people out there that bought this game at the time and really enjoyed it. Come on, give me a weapon. This guy's got one. Okay, so, right, I've selected it. I've got a knife. That's a nice colourful energy bar down there. I'm never going to get a second hamburger, but you can definitely upgrade your weapon. Take that. The trouble is, again, people will appear just off screen and start shooting at you. So unless you're really, really clever and learn how to kill them birds, which I obviously never did, you're going to take hits. You're going to take loads and loads of hits. It's a functional game. It's not completely broken. I must say, I did see a video of this quite a few years ago by a YouTuber called Zypho, who pretty much exclusively does videos of Amstrad games. He always does complete playthroughs with commentary of Amstrad games, and he managed to complete it, so it is possible. It's a fully functional game. So I think I'll end the video there, but before I go, my go-to magazine was always Amstrad Action, and let's just take a quick look at what their review scores were for this game at the time, and I'd be very, very surprised if it was a high score.